Our next program this morning begins in
6, 5, 4.
This is the Open University.
Hello, estudiantes. Welcome back. And I kind of have a hybrid talk for you today because I've only made one new song, and I think it's definitely the last song on Vivid. Vivid is finished. It's 15 tracks long. It's 60 minutes and a few seconds. And it ends with this song called Levitation, which after thinking I'd finished the album already last weekend, I started doing cover or sort of remaking, reposting demos of songs from my very first album, Circus Maximus. I did I just happened to find a cassette. I have these cassettes everywhere lying around here, and I found a cassette of these old ELF cassettes, which my dad ran a language college called the Edinburgh Language Foundation, and I got free cassettes, so I used to make my demos on these things. These were labels. Actually, I designed this label myself. K1, Kernels 1 to 6, Situations and Dialogues. It was originally labeled, and then it has Happy Family Demo, Pier House. This was where we made our first demo for the album, the Happy Family album. But after that, I think in 1984, you can hear the first compositions which ended up on Circus Maximus, which came out in '86. I'd just moved to London, was living with my friends Malcolm and Susan, and recording on the Queenstown Road these strange songs about the Old Testament, influenced by Brecht and Kierkegaard. And so I remade John the Baptist Jones. I didn't remake it, I just posted the demo, and I just sort of posed as if I were singing it. Inevitably getting these comments about how I wish he'd do it. I'd give my eye teeth to have Momus do another guitar album. I have a guitar on all my albums really, but these days it tends to be fairly electronic guitar. But then I surprisingly went back into the song-making mode and made this Levitation song, which started off as a video. It was really just that I wanted to film myself jumping in the air and make it look as if I were suspended in the air. And so I started doing that just as a kind of thing to do. And then thought I would make a song around it. And really the metaphor was that the previous life we had before this COVID episode now seems miraculous. It seems very distant to us. And it seems like a kind of, like that moment in the sort of cartoons when the Roadrunner runs off the cliff and hasn't yet noticed that he's not supported by anything. But as long as he doesn't look down, he's not going to fall. It's this kind of weird subjectivist illusion whereby you only fall when you take account of the conditions of your falling, the gravitational conditions. So we were kind of suspended in midair in the past, and I feel this about my past life. I was kind of suspended, not really realizing how fortunate I was to be able to travel and to be free and to have the kind of amazing lifestyle I had. Hope to have again one day, but who knows? We don't know how we'll be able to travel, how far, under what conditions, and at what cost as well, with airlines going bankrupt left, right and centre. So the previous conditions have disappeared, and we kind of have looked down now, but looking back at that, pre-February, pre-March kind of existence, it does look as if now we see the kind of delusion that we were suffering, that we thought we could continue. We thought it was sustainable. We kind of knew at the same time that it wasn't sustainable environmentally, but we thought that financially it was sustainable somehow, and logistically. So Levitation becomes a metaphor. It's a bit like the song about Orpheus and the underworld. It's reaching a little bit further for metaphors for the current condition or for the previous condition of our existence. And I kept tinkering with it, making new mixes of it, trying to make it more minimal. The interesting thing about musically about the song is that it goes back to a cover version I made. Again, I was opening old files, and I opened the file for Because You're Frightened, the cover version of magazine I made for the covers album from 2015, so 2014 rather. So I kind of went back to that, and actually that was built around a sample of Steve Reich's music for 18 musicians, which has been a key work I've been plundering for this record, this whole album. It's got a sample of music for 18 musicians in there, and I put that in just because it kind of it really changed the punky feeling of the original song, Because You're Frightened, and made it this more kind of serene, meditative song about fear, a calm song about fear, which seemed like an interesting paradox to play with. So you can hear in the first mix, you can hear a little bit of that sample somewhere later in the song, but actually I also sampled Laurie Anderson's song from Big Science. Which song was it? I think it's Let X equal X. I mean, there's a sequence of songs which have different titles but which use the same beat, which is a metronome and a clap. And it's also very similar to Seen and Not Seen on the Talking Heads album Remain in Light. I think they were deliberately using a kind of Laurie Anderson-esque, although she hadn't released Big Science. That came 2 years after Remain in Light. So, but it's not the other way around. I think because she'd made those songs in the late 70s, so they had certainly heard them. And she was also referring to things that they were referring to in the minimalist music kind of scene in New York at the time. So I think this, I don't know who would have done these very austere beats, which sound kind of ethnic, but also very math rock and very minimalist. Just a metronome. I have actually a metronome here, which I used to use in my really early recordings when I was a teenager, an orange plastic metronome, which I tried to record for one of the other songs and couldn't get a solid rhythm out of, and I had to actually just sample a single tick from it and then sequence it because it was so unreliable. But so the Levitation song, I don't know, when you're fussing with something, the lyric was done very quickly, and it was done in that sort of distorted style, which I often use if I want to have a sense of urgency in the vocal. But I went back and tried to remake it more minimal, not terribly successfully. It's got the third mix of it has the sort of Beatles, Lucy in the Sky, Strawberry Fields kind of feel to it, the old samples from the Mellotron. But I think I've kind of gone back to liking the first one better. It seems a bit more organic and seems to flow better. I'm not entirely sure yet. But that is the last track on the album, and it kind of does reprise some of the elements that you hear in Working From Home and other tracks, the minimalist influence, and it's a little more subtle and metaphorical in its approach to the COVID crisis, which does seem to be kind of over. It's beginning to feel like it's over here in Berlin because of the opening of shops. So I actually went out shopping to Muji on Monday, or was it Tuesday, and bought something which I've been thinking about buying for a long time. I was the only customer in Muji. I cycled up there, beautiful weather, sunny spring weather, warm, and not many people about, obviously. So in Muji, of course, you have to have a basket. This is the new, I'm not quite sure why that distances you to be carrying a basket, but there was no other customer in Muji. It was just the staff and me. So I went in there, and it just felt very nice to be back in a shop like Muji. And so I thought, out of sheer gratitude, I should buy some bigger things. I bought some sort of little snack chocolates and a new bowl and a new bookend. I have these metal Muji bookends which I use in my library. But I also got this CD player, which I've always thought it's overpriced, but it kind of looks like a fun thing to have. Because I've been going through my CDs and trying to see which of my own CDs I actually had, and extracting them from the rest and realizing there are gaps in my collection. I don't have the Philosophy of Moments, for instance. I don't have that on CD. I don't have even Pubic Intellectual. I seem to have lost my copies of Pubic Intellectual. But CDs have been like a very downgraded part of my archives collection. It's that rainy day, though, isn't it, when you you go back even to the neglected parts of your collections, the things you have in your house, old cassettes, old CDs. I really should throw out about 30% of my CDs because it's just complete trash. It's stuff that came free on the cover of magazines, or CD-ROMs that I'm never going to look at again from French computer magazines, and just shrapnel, sort of splintered plastic rubbish, which I'm never going to consult. But obviously my own CDs mean something to me, so I made a sort of display of those on a table and realized what I was missing. I don't even have accordion. Hagen Verlego, the designer, has some copies to give me for accordion when I can see him again. But because I've got this setup, I didn't really have a CD player in the house. I've got a sort of DVD player which is hooked up to my stereo system, which I never ever play CDs on. It's somehow very, it's not just the splintering plastic cases that annoy me about CDs. It's also the way that they have to spin up. I really hate that spinning up process. Even that happens with this thing. This CD player, it's got a sort of very tinny speaker, and you turn it on by pulling the power cable, which feels wrong. It feels like that's going to break very quickly. And then it's kind of nice and simple that it just sits there on the wall. It's not even bracketed. It's got a bracket to actually, I could put it here on the wall. That might be fun. This is, it's kind of interesting to me when I go through my CDs and think that most of them are awful and rubbish and I should throw them out. But then I also have some which I think, wow, this looks interesting. So it's kind of curious to note which things I do find interesting. What's playing right now is Akitsuyuko. And this is a record that came out on Child Disc. I better not play too much of it because I guess the copyright thing will kick in. But what I found was a lot of these Child Disc records, which I got early in the century. Child Disc was, of course, Nobukazu Takimura's label, which was based in Kyoto. And I found it really inspiring, especially this CD songbook. It is literally childish music, discs from adults who kind of are finding their own inner child. And a friend of mine, Hirono Nishiyama, this is a Guttevolk record made by her. She was on Child Disc at a certain time. And I really respond to that for some reason. This is also Child Disc, I think. This is Clockwork Hermes by Nobuyasu Sakonda. Yeah, that's also Child Disc. Yeah, I have all these rather mysterious and rather infantile, but also complex and formalistic records from Nobukazu Takimura's label. And this is Brigitte Fontaine. Araski and Brigitte Fontaine, I find, somehow works in the kitchen. I don't know, Comme la radio, for instance, I've been listening to that. This was a huge influence on me, music arabo-andalouse. It's made by the Atrium Musicae de Madrid. And I bought this in Tower Records, just kind of almost at random. I went into Tower, went upstairs to the classical section, I guess, and in about 1990-something, 1997, I guess. And this, for instance, I sampled this for Going for a Walk with the Line, the Paul Clay song. It's got a sort of Arab Andalus riff going on in the background, which comes from this CD. So that's very nice to listen to. The thing about this is the speaker is so small, and it's mono as well. And the acoustics in here are not great. My flat's a bit too bright and reverberant, really, for music to sound good in. But the things that do sound good are things which are quite simple and repetitive and not too vocal intensive as well. The things I like to listen to, mostly rather instrumental. This is my friend Douglas Benford, who I mentioned last time, I think, talking about the 80s and how we were doing these postmodernist kind of songs influenced by minimalism. So he was influential on me then. This is a Tom Lehrer CD, revisited, I guess a compilation. And Music for films, Brian, you know. The thing is, a CD lasts for a certain amount of time, and I'm not used to listening to music in that way. This is Hosono's Monad box, which is kind of fake ethnic music, I think, from the 80s. And I like Hosono. So that's just stuff I've pulled out to listen to. It's a little bit difficult to get back into the habit of listening to a whole CD. You know, having just made a CD, which is 60 minutes long, when you put on a piece of music that's going to last for 60 minutes... Oh, and the other thing I'm listening to a lot is the Gongs, a band I signed to my American Patchwork label after seeing them at Oberlin College in about 2000, when I was on tour, or 2002, I think, when I was on tour in the US. And they were kind of like a Harry Partch, a student band, very, very quiet and very intense and very strange and mysterious gongs, instrumentation, gongs and synths and things. They really impressed me. Their performance was so amazing at Oberlin College in Ohio that I signed them to my label, and we put out this record, Rob Reich, it was called. That's really nice to listen to. I don't know why. There's something really... I've sort of gone in quite a Gongs-like direction myself. Harry Partch has been a big influence on me. So I find that very intriguing and just pleasant to listen to. But when you put on a CD and it lasts for like 1 hour, and then you go off and inevitably you're on Twitter or whatever, you go back onto your computer and then a video comes up and you want to listen to, and the CD is still playing in the other room. That's the kind of thing that nobody actually sits down for 1 hour and listens to a piece of music continuously. We don't have the time, we're distracted constantly, and our distractions tend to have this sonic element that it will involve videos. Every time you go to certain newspaper websites, you know, you can't avoid videos popping up. I kind of hate that, but there are moments when I want to listen to, you know, a piece of video, talking or music or whatever. So then I have to get up and actually come. There is a remote that comes with this, but it didn't seem to work mine, and I don't use it. So I just had to physically come over to this and switch it off again. So what I'm finding I do is I play one piece of music while I prepare a cup of tea or coffee or a meal or something in the kitchen. It's a kitchen implement. So what else did I do? On this shopping day, I went to Humana, which is my tailor, my favourite clothes shop for second-hand clothes, where I bought this jacket, for instance, and got some seersucker shorts because we're getting back into the warm weather period again, the shorts kind of wearing weather. And just stuff like that. I mean, even the big electronics stores are now open, but you have to queue up outside, and they let 10 people in at a time, that kind of thing. So there is this sense of normality returning. And it's kind of nice because it's very laid back. It's kind of like a mixture of holidays and business days. And the air is cleaner, the city is kind of laid back. And if this is the new normal, I'm actually quite enjoying it. I think I'm realizing how much toxicity was generated by business as usual. And I kind of like that we have the best of the old world in terms of things like Muji, in terms of international presences in Berlin. It's not totally provincial yet. It may become provincial, as you know, if jet travel continues to be very difficult, and supply lines are suffering as well, and we sort of do return to a more subsistence kind of economy. I got an invitation from my friend Jan, who lives in the countryside 90 minutes north of here, to come up and visit, and I'm sure I will do that at some point. This is the good time of year to visit the countryside around Berlin, because it's beautiful and it's warm and the air is fresh and stuff. Although they're pretty close to Poland, which does a lot of burning of coal power. Also, the end of fossil fuel is something really to look forward to, the collapse of the oil price, and the fact that people hopefully will not be using their cars. The one marring element in my view out from my kitchen over, I have a view of colonies and allotments, people's sort of rather very German way of having little huts surrounded by gardens which people can come to and work on little personal farms, essentially. That's marred by the fact that in between me here and those colonies is a garage, and so some macho asshole has been working on his motorbike, revving the engine very loudly and ruining the tranquility. So you still have this fossil fuels hell, the staging of a kind of daily hell, quotidian hell in the city of the internal combustion engine, which is already deeply anachronistic and will start to be phased out as electric cars take over, but also as the peak carbon is passed. And we seem to be at the moment of peak carbon. I think 2019 will prove to have been the year most dominated by fossil fuels, and then things are going to get better rapidly, hopefully, in terms of not poisoning our lungs and not poisoning the air in our cities, and also just the noise that they make. The whole thing of being a macho asshole as soon as you step into your car. It's funny because I have two sides of this flat. I have the back looking out over the green tranquility of people relaxing. Children are often playing in the garden, Turkish families and things, and or working on their allotments there. And people are in great tranquility out the back. But as soon as they step out the front into their vehicles, they become assholes and they're beeping their horns, and there are a lot of collisions because there's an intersection and people are too macho to actually stop at the intersection. There's stop signs, but people don't really. And it's a complex situation where you have to look 3 or 4 different ways, and people don't really have the 3D mentality to think about, oh, somebody might be coming from that direction when I'm looking in that direction. So there's a lot of collisions there, and a lot of swearing, and a lot of shouting, and a lot of revving of engines and honking of horns. You just see that the internal combustion engine unleashed on the world in a kind of blissful ignorance a century or so ago has become this kind of living hell. And it brings out the worst in humans who, in a green tranquility through the back window, are very happy and tranquil and peaceful and cooperative. They don't have to be these individualistic assholes unless they're tuning their motorbikes. That's pretty much all I have to say to you today. The album's finished. There is a YouTube playlist. You can play through it on that. And who knows what the next stage is. I'm waiting for lockdown to be lifted so I can visit my girlfriend again in Paris. We still don't have a date for that. The French are being told they're allowed a 100-kilometer radius, and they should try and, if they do make trips, make them essential trips. And so I don't know if seeing your significant other is considered essential. There's been some weird contradictory messaging in the French media recently about who is an essential person you might visit, and actually some ministers have been saying that could be your partner. Other ministers saying it's not. Sorry, that's Spain actually. That little controversy about politicians misspeaking about who is an essential contact, and whether it's your friend or your lover or whatever. So I'm hoping to be mobile again soon, but who knows? Who knows? And speak to you next time.
Open University.
TV Club. Our next program this morning begins in 2 minutes.